Most of the Germans on the coast came through New Orleans, of course, and they came for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest reasons was in the early 1800s, the German Empire, as it was known, actually the German Holy Roman Empire, was broken up by Napoleon. A lot of them left Germany for the simple reason they didn't want to fight in the wars all the time. And yet, for example, you had the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine, which changed hands several times over the course of a couple hundred years between the French and the Germans. On both sides of my family, I have relatives, last name Michel. On my mother's side of the family, they say Michael. Good German pronunciation. On my father's side of the family, also German, they say Michel. So it depends on who was in charge, I guess, at the time, the French or the Germans. But a lot of them came into New Orleans, as my family did. And a lot of it had to do with trying to escape the wars that ravaged and went through the various principalities of what was formerly the German Empire. Of course, Biloxi was pretty well set. The business was pretty much seafood, and it was pretty much French. Some Spanish influence later on in the 19th century. But Ocean Springs in particular was a nice place for Germans to land, as was the case in my family, but it was also the Arndt family, the Ent family, with some of the other German families that immigrated into Ocean Springs. Now, in the case of the Joachim family, my family, they started in New Orleans, and my great-grandfather, Benjamin Franklin Joachim, was the first to make his way to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and he came over for his health. He had been prosperous in New Orleans. He had been in the grocery business, and also, the family had been in the grocery business, and my great-grandfather and his brother had a company called Joachim Brothers, and what they did was they were responsible for distribution of the daily newspapers all over town, which of course in those days were printed in several languages. They later were in the real estate business, Joachim Brothers Real Estate, which has tended to run through my family to this day. My sister's still in the real estate business. So they came over for his health. He had bad health. Matter of fact, my uncle talked about how bad his asthma was, and quite often he would sleep at night sitting up in a chair so he could breathe. Came to Ocean Springs, built what was known as Joachim Cottage, a vacation site near the Ocean Springs Small Craft Harbor. People would come over and rent rooms and stay there and enjoy the salubrious health of the local water, as it was called back in those days. And he eventually sold that and then built a boarding house on Bowen Street in Ocean Springs. And from there, later on, he and four of the gentlemen created Builders Supply Company. They sold lumber, they sold roofing shingles, brick molds, things like that. He later sold that business, and then he began going about putting together waterworks. Ocean Springs was really growing at this time in the latter half of the 19th century. And there was a growing German influence there, between the Joachims and the Arndts and the Ents and some of the other families that migrated over there. They prospered, the Germans did over here, and the influence of some of these families, it continues to this day on the area. A lot of the Germans that came here were Calvinist. Back in the olden times, they called that Reformed Evangelical. Okay, and the most mainstream the Calvinists would find here in their religion would be the Presbyterian faith. And so I think if you look at some of the older Presbyterian churches, like the one in Ocean Springs, that you'd find probably some influences of that. If you go to Nativity Cathedral here in Biloxi, beautiful stained glass windows, old world stained glass windows. And those come from a German company, which, as I understand, is still in business today. I have thought for years of creating a Teutonic club for those of us of German descent. I just haven't. I've had some thoughts about it. I've just haven't put together. But those organizations, those cultural and ethnic organizations here, are really popular, and they do really well. Hibernia Club has a lot of fun. They're a large group. The Fleur-de-Lis Society, what we call the French Club, has been a fixture here for a century almost. I mean, they do good things, and they have great fun, and I think it's a great way to maintain culture. So it's something I've certainly thought about, but I don't know of anything in particular that binds the Germans together at this point. I can tell you, I think that their influence has been in entrepreneurship and helping to build, helping to make the Gulf Coast what it is today. If you look at these individual families, and again, I mentioned some of them, and I'm proud to say my own family, that they've been involved in creating things and making business happen and bringing some prosperity and some sense of strength here to the local economy. And they came with some very strong values. And I think those values have gone out throughout the community, beyond just the German background. A sense of home, a sense of belonging, I think, has been a big thing that they've done. The Germans came here and they embraced the area very strongly, I think. And I think they were ready to look forward towards America and probably a little less back to the old world, as maybe some of the other cultures did. So I don't think it's that they abandoned their culture when they got here, but they certainly found it easier to look forward and how they were going to fit into this big gumbo pot of ours here.